begin a process of reflecting upon those changes together. As I think many colleagues will be aware, recent developments in AI and particular ChatGPT, as it's known, in the last months has been making some waves. There's been lots of discussions. I think the prize for the best response to this new departure might go to Nick Cave, who, when presented with a song in the style of Nick Cave written by AI, by ChatGPT, responded, "This song sucks." Others may think that Nick Cave's songs themselves suck, but be that as it may, there's obviously going to be a lot of discussion around this, huge implications for the sort of work we do, and obviously also many challenges for questions of academic integrity, plagiarism, assessment patterns, how we as scholars and as teachers respond to these new changes, finding ways of living with and working with new technologies and the ways they may change some of the things that we're doing or the ways they may not. So in order to kick off our discussion around these issues, our Associate Head of Department, Gareth Dale, has kindly offered to give us a brief presentation and some reflections upon things that are happening. And then I'd propose we can open things up for colleagues to begin the discussion and share some thoughts on where things might go in the future. We're obviously not going to be reaching any definitive conclusions today. I think this is going to be a very long and ongoing process of reflection and discussion, but we judged it to be quite important for us to be coming together and starting to brainstorm some ideas for the directions in which we might like to move over the coming years. So without further ado, I'll hand things over to Gareth.
Thanks, Peter. And hello, everyone. I'm going to talk to you about ChatGPT. It is a new AI-driven chatbot that's rapidly gaining popularity in the academic world and is revolutionizing the way universities relate to students. It uses deep learning to understand the context of the conversation and is able to generate natural-sounding responses. As you can imagine, this technology has a lot of potential applications, including in the university environment. For example, it can be used to help students with their research, giving real-time responses to their inquiries. It can analyze a student's research question and provide relevant and accurate answers. In responding to student inquiries, it frees up teachers to focus on their other work. Unfortunately, there are also major drawbacks that teachers must take into consideration. First off, it risks exacerbating inequalities between different groups because these machines are vulnerable to biases on factors such as gender or race within the algorithms. Secondly, it undermines activities such as essay writing because it takes away the creativity involved in producing good coursework. This presents challenges around developing critical thinking skills among students who are relying too heavily on AI. Overall, ChatGPT is an incredibly powerful tool for universities, but it can also present some challenges. It's important for educators to be aware of the potential pitfalls of using it and to think carefully about whether or not to implement ChatGPT into our teaching practices. Full stop. I say full stop to indicate that that's the end of the section of the talk that ChatGPT wrote for me. Could someone turn their mic off? I read it out verbatim. The instruction I gave, apart from the thanks Peter was not preempted by ChatGPT, but apart from that, it was verbatim. The instruction I gave the bot was write a 2-minute talk to university teachers, briefly outline ChatGPT, saying how it can be useful to students and educators, then explain why it creates major difficulties for academia. Of course, you all guessed that all that was written by AI. You know me well enough. You knew these dull boilerplate sentences could only come from a robot brain, not from my brain. But would you be so sure of that if it was, say, an anonymous student's coursework or even their presentation that they're reading out, as I just read out just then? And also, that little talk was only my second request from ChatGPT. I could have given it far more refined instructions. I could have asked it to make the talk entertaining in some way or other. I mean, ChatGPT is able to perform phenomenal creative feats. A historian at King's College that I know, he asked it to come up with a speech by Mao Zedong enjoining Chinese citizens to avoid to always eat their dumplings with soy sauce, and it did it brilliantly. I mean, I've shared this with some of you. It did it quite extraordinarily brilliantly in capturing the flavor of Mao's speeches. The Western imperialists are trying to divide the Chinese society by undermining our age-old traditions of eating dumplings with soy sauce, and this sort of thing. I could have asked it to be more entertaining, or I could have asked it to mimic my speaking style. It has instant access to many or maybe all of my published articles. I'm not sure if it can listen to my talks on YouTube, but I wouldn't put anything past it. It's the closest to omniscience that a non-believer such as I have ever come across, really. I'm tempted to start worshipping it. This, by the way, is where the AI doom mongers find cause for alarm, because they see omniscience turning toward omnipotence. AI doesn't have physical strength, but it'll find a way of orchestrating humans to start tearing strips off one another. That's the sort of doom danger of AI. And the other danger is one that the Australian philosopher and singer, and who Peter mentioned earlier, Nick Cave, said where he said ChatGPT is now in its infancy, but perhaps that is its emerging horror, that it'll forever be in its infancy. It'll always have further to go, and the direction is always always forward, and always faster. Microsoft, just today, I think they announced that they're integrating a natural language AI into their search engines. Anyway, we're here to talk about not philosophy, but pedagogy. And I think the first thing to say, as I see it, is that AI is going to be incredibly helpful in our work and in dealing with students. The robot ordered me to say that bit. For teaching, ChatGPT can be helpful in suggesting ideas. So, for example, when we have dissertation students looking at topics that we're not experts in. I mean, they choose such a variety. And in the past, I would do a quick Google search, but now I think I'll increasingly ask AI, which is much better at coming up with interesting and useful ideas on the topic, much often useful and quicker than scouring through Wikipedia pages. Or with admin, it can be very helpful. I mean, apart from the little talk that you've just heard, the first 2 minutes of this talk, the other task I've asked ChatGPT to do was to draw up a program spec for our new master's program in activism, and I shared that with some of you. It did it pretty brilliantly, right? A few tweaks would be needed. It set the duration as a two-year course, as in North America, rather than one. But for this kind of tedious work, I think it's going to be amazingly helpful. It's so good. It could probably take over most of the work of our senior management team at Brunel, and we could automate much of them and save the university shed loads of money. I'm tempted to ask. Anyway, it can also help students. For instance, in their job applications, there was a recent study that compared applicants for jobs who'd used algorithmic writing assistants with those who had not. I'm not sure if it was ChatGPT they were using. It could have been some older tools like Quillbot and Grammarly. But either way, the study found that the job seekers who used these apps were 8% more likely to get hired than those who didn't. Now, of course, that's helping individual students, not the student body, and it may be helping the wrong students, the ones who are prepared to use maybe less than ethical shortcuts, which leads on to inevitably to the question of coursework, which Peter addressed. Did you notice, by the way, that the bot that wrote the 2-minute talk I gave at the outset, it ignored that whole question, even though I asked it I instructed it to look at the challenges involved. And do we give it bonus points for its sort of self-serving shrewdness on that, or do we mark it down because it's pretending there's no elephant in the room? Anyway, we should, I think, increasingly we're going to have to build critical AI literacy into our teaching in various ways. And we might think of ways of including it into our coursework as well. For example, you could ask students to, I'm not sure, I haven't thought this through, but formulate the best instructions to get a bot to write the best essay, or maybe give them some essays written by AI and ask them to critique them, because AI obviously does make lots of, well, some errors, not lots maybe, but some. Just yesterday, a journal that uses AI to select its peer reviewers, it invited me to write an article, to review, sorry, an article on Carl Friedrich. I haven't read anything by Friedrich for, I don't know, 30 years. Haven't cited him in anything I've published this century, but so, you know, they do make mistakes. How do we deal with it? Well, anti-cheating software firms have been developing AI detectors, but I'm not sure whether they're going to keep ahead of the AI. Obviously there's a arms race there. And if you want to evade detection, you can run your essay, your AI-produced essay through Quillbot, or you could just change some sentences around and make minor changes. Anyway, even if we use those detectors, are we even allowed to use the results to mark a student down or send them to the academic misconduct process? On my master's class just last month, a few weeks ago, several students used ChatGPT, or perhaps it was Quillbot. Anyways, the detectors found around a 70% probability that they were fake. In one case, 99% probability they were fake. I also checked my own essays. It gave only 99% probability. I'm a bit miffed to admit that they were authentic. So clearly they're largely working, but I'm not sure if we're allowed to use them yet. I'm not trying to suggest that we're going to be hit by a massive wave of undetectable plagiarism. In my own classes, my hunch is that we've been riding that wave anyway for a few years, at least on my master's module. I don't think on my other modules. I mean, with things like brought essays and the use of Quillbot and Grammarly, which are very hard to detect. So what should we do? Clearly, it's not an either or. It's not a reject AI or embrace it. It's here, and we're going to have to work out what aspects to reject and which to embrace. I think we need to begin with thinking of the needs of students, thinking ahead in their careers. How are they going to be using AI writing in their careers? Will they be using it to provide a kind of basic skeleton for the task they're working on? Or are they going to use it as a research assistant or as an editor or all of these things? As to the really tricky task of cheating, we need obviously guidance from the university and from the sector. To begin with, on the use of ChatGPT detectors. So integrity policies need updating. Obviously, this is going to force us to consider further ways of supporting students with their writing and with their confidence to approach us for help, so they feel less need to take shortcuts such as this. In my master's class, some of the problem is to do with language. Some students are scared that their English just isn't sophisticated enough. So I explain to them, I try and reassure them, you can make pretty complex points with very simple language. I'm tempted to start holding seminars by the rules of Neanderthal poetry. I don't know if you do. Does anyone know that game? So there is a game where there are various things written on cards, and you have to explain them using monosyllables. So if you transpose those rules onto my seminar on, say, the Japanese economy, you could say a sentence like, "It grew fast post-war. First they make cheap crude stuff, then years go by, high-tech goods, all the while big state, but state give big push to trade." You can provide a decent summary even if your grasp of English is Neanderthal level. But I've been struggling to get this through to students on my course. So and some are still using ChatGPT. At least I assume it's ChatGPT. I assume this because I've seen some crazy referencing in recent assignments, referencing where all the claims made and all referred to in all have nothing to do with all the claims and the sentences that are referenced have nothing to do with the article or book that is cited. But I gather that ChatGPT is working on this feature, so the references in future should be much better tailored to the text. They won't be so glaringly weird. Although glaringly isn't quite the right term. I did have to look them up, but in future they should be done properly, so it won't be so it'll be harder to spot when you do look up the references. Right. Okay. So the bottom line is we need to take steps to design out cheating from our assessment menu, but the space for doing that is narrowing. It's getting more constricted. For example, what about presentations? Well, as you've seen, they can be written pretty well by AI. I don't know if the bots can design PowerPoint slides, but it wouldn't surprise me. And AI graphics are amazingly capable right now. If you'll know this if you've seen the pictures circulating on social media of the Jewel burger or of the men washing hot dogs and these sorts of things. But the Q&A at the end of a presentation would be a different story entirely, obviously. And a Q&A is the ultimate employability skill as well. It's basically an interview. With presentations, mentioning presentations, I think we need to remember when we're re-gauging our assessments that presentations involve a shift from an anonymous marking, which has been standard in British higher education for a long time, and that we need to keep that in mind when we adapt assessments. Another option would be to return to in-person exams. This is what a lot of Australian universities are doing in response to ChatGPT. Personally, I'm not averse to exams, so long as they're one dish in a varied menu. But I know for some colleagues, the pedagogical arguments against them weigh very heavily, and I understand that. There are other suggestions that we could think about for assignments. An assignment could begin with a piece of in-class writing, forming a launch point for then a take-home assignment, or you can have seminar response papers that have to draw on the class discussion, so the student has to take notes and use them in the paper. Or you could build in a requirement for analysis of audio or video. I don't think that's possible right now for ChatGPT. Anyway, there's some suggestions. I'll leave it at that and throw it open to the floor.
Thanks very much, Gareth. That was great to get that overview of some potentials and challenges and possibilities. Obviously, there's going to be a lot going on here. We are in the stage of infancy. Maybe we'll stay there forever, or maybe things will move on. But clearly, this has huge potential to impact upon a whole range of different of our activities, not only assessments, but also more generally. I think, as Gareth emphasized, adopting a balanced approach here and thinking about the potential benefits that can be had in what ways and what forms in the sort of work we do and what students are doing is one important perspective we should keep in mind. It's not all doom and gloom. Immediately, there's a whole range of other things that are going to be emerging with the